I watched her laugh through the glass wall of that restaurant, and something inside me finally broke. It wasn't the kind of laugh you fake when someone makes a bad joke. It wasn't polite. It wasn't careful. It was the kind that makes your shoulders bounce, and your wine spill, and your eyes crinkle in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not around me, anyway. She touched his wrist when he said something. Just a light grace. But it was the ease that ruined me. Like it was muscle memory. Like she'd done it 100 times before. That was when I realized the truth. She didn't think I was watching. She didn't even remember I existed. I stood there, frozen behind the landscaping hedge outside the window, like some rejected rom-com extra. I hadn't planned this. I wasn't spying. I was early. It was supposed to be a surprise. Her birthday was in 2 days. I'd booked us a weekend away, somewhere with trees and no-cell reception and a fireplace she could post about later. I was going to tell her about it right here. I even made a stupid reservation under a fake name just so she wouldn't suspect. But she beat me here. And she didn't come alone. They were tucked into a booth like they owned the corner. Her shoes were off, tucked under her. She only sits like that when she's completely comfortable. With me, she always said the floor felt gross. But here, she didn't care. She leaned in close and whispered something I couldn't hear, and he grinned like he'd already won. And maybe he had. I don't remember walking back to the car. I don't remember turning the key. I don't even remember driving home. But I remember the sound of her laugh, loud and free and real, and the way it stopped the moment she looked up and saw me outside the window. Because by then, I was already gone. I didn't slam the door when I got home. I just let it close behind me with that soft, final-sounding click, the kind of sound you don't notice unless you're the one who knows what it means. She wasn't home yet, obviously, probably still sipping Cabernet and twirling her hair while I was out here trying not to hyperventilate in my own hallway. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the entryway and stared at them like they might unlock a different version of this life. One where I wasn't an idiot. One where I hadn't spent the last 6 months wondering why she never looked me in the eyes anymore. One where I hadn't just watched the woman I married flirt with a man who wasn't me. In the open, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You know what's crazy? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I just felt small. Smaller than I've ever felt in my entire life. Like someone had vacuumed the air out of my lungs and replaced it with shame. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just shame. Because it wasn't just about what she did. It was about what I didn't. What I hadn't been. What I had let happen. The suitcase was still half-packed from the weekend I'd been planning. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it, at the stupid hiking socks I'd rolled up neatly, the little card I'd tucked inside with her name written in cursive. Happy early birthday, Jules. Just us this time. I almost laughed. Not the good kind. When the garage door opened 20 minutes later, I didn't move. I just listened. She came in like it was any other night. Heels clicking, purse hitting the counter, the fridge door squeaking. I waited. I thought maybe she'd say something. Anything. But there was just the sound of water running. I finally walked out into the hallway. She turned, startled, hand still on a bottle of wine. "Oh," she said, blinking. "I didn't think you'd be home yet." I nodded. "Yeah, I was." She didn't ask what I meant. Instead, she reached for a glass and poured herself a drink. Not even a pause. So I stood there, trying not to let my voice shake, and said, "I saw you." The glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "Saw me," she echoed. "At the restaurant." There it was, that flicker, the half-second shift in her face where everything rearranged itself. Surprise. Panic. Calculation. And then, just like that, her expression smoothed into something unreadable. "You followed me?" "No," I said quietly. "I had a reservation there. For us." She didn't speak, just set the glass down. Carefully, I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't sorry. She was just annoyed, inconvenienced, like I'd interrupted something more important than our entire marriage. "I was going to surprise you," I added, voice barely above a whisper. She crossed her arms. "Then maybe you shouldn't have shown up uninvited." That was it. That was the moment something in me died. And I knew, as clearly as I've ever known anything, that I couldn't stay here. Not another night. Not even another hour. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I turned and walked back into the bedroom, grabbed the half-packed suitcase, zipped it shut, and wheeled it past her. She didn't stop me. Didn't even ask where I was going. The door closed with that same soft click behind me. And this time, I noticed. The night swallowed me as soon as I stepped outside. The suitcase wheels rattled over the cracked concrete like tiny echoes of everything I had kept quiet for years. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. The neighborhood was still, the kind of suburban stillness that makes every sound feel louder than it is. My breath, my shoes, my heartbeat, all of it thundered in my ears. For a second, I thought she might come running after me, call my name, demand an explanation. But the door behind me stayed shut, and the only movement was a curtain shifting in someone else's window across the street. I threw the suitcase into the back seat of my car and sat behind the wheel without turning the ignition. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight the leather creaked. All the plans I had made for the weekend, the hiking trails, the fireplace, the awkward but hopeful note I had written in the card, burned through my mind like a film strip catching fire. I had been holding on to some pathetic, fragile hope that maybe if I tried hard enough, she'd remember who we were. But after tonight, that hope felt like a sick joke. I started the car and drove, no destination. The radio was off. The streets blurred past, lit only by the orange glow of streetlights and the occasional flash of a passing car. It was strange how calm I felt. Numb, but calm. The kind of calm that comes when you're past panic, past heartbreak, and into some empty space where nothing makes sense anymore. I could feel myself rehearsing conversations in my head, imagining her reaction when she realized I was gone, but each version felt thinner and less real. She'd probably just shrug. Maybe text that guy. Maybe they'd laugh about it later. By the time I reached the old highway out of town, the numbness started to crack. The reality hit like a punch. I had no plan, no backup, and no clue what came next. I wanted to call someone, anyone. But who do you call when your life collapses at 11 p.m. on a weeknight? My friends drifted years ago, mostly because she didn't like them. My family lived states away, and I'd been too embarrassed to tell them how bad things had gotten. So there I was, the man she called pathetic behind my back, driving nowhere with a half-packed suitcase and a cracked heart. And then, just as I was about to pull over and figure out where to sleep, my phone buzzed. Not once, 5 times in a row. Messages from her, lighting up the screen. I didn't look at them right away. I just stared at the glow, my thumb hovering over the notification. Something told me they weren't apologies. Something told me they weren't even about me. And for the first time all night, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't shame. It wasn't anger either. It was something sharper. Because if she thought she knew me, the soft, apologizing, easy-to-leave husband, she had no idea what I was capable of when I finally stopped begging for scraps. I finally read the messages 3 hours later, parked behind a closed gas station off a country road I couldn't name. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine. I'd shut the car off to save gas, and the silence was thick, so thick I could hear my own stomach growl, feel the buzz of blood in my wrists. The screen was still lit up when I tapped it, her name at the top, Juliet. Funny how a name that once made me feel like the luckiest idiot in the world now felt like a splinter I couldn't pull out. The first message was short. Where are you? That was timestamped 2 hours ago. The second was colder. Can we talk like adults, or are you really doing this right now? Then, don't be dramatic. Please. Please. The same words she'd use when I forgot to buy oat milk. The same tone. As if the most intimate betrayal of our entire marriage was somehow equivalent to a grocery list mistake. And then came the one that changed something in me. You walked out, so don't blame me if I move on faster than you expected. I didn't respond. I didn't even react, not outwardly. But inside, it felt like the last lock on some long-rusted gate had snapped open. Not rage, not even revenge, just a hollow sort of clarity, the kind that makes everything quiet. You stop asking why. You stop explaining yourself. You start watching, listening, planning. I slept in the car that night. Didn't even recline the seat. I just stared at the roof, hands folded over my chest like a corpse in a cheap suit. Morning came slow and gray, and the first thing I did was check her socials. Not because I wanted to see her, because I needed to know what kind of story she'd tell the world. I expected vague posts, maybe a cryptic quote about growth or freedom. But she didn't even wait 24 hours. There it was, a picture of her and him at some rooftop bar, her hand around a wine glass, his arm around the back of her chair. The caption said, "New chapters feel good." I zoomed in and noticed something that made my stomach twist. She was wearing the earrings I gave her last Christmas. The ones she said were a little too fancy for everyday wear. I guess that didn't apply when she was sitting beside him. The comments were flooding in already. Her friends with hearts. Inside jokes. Some girl I didn't know wrote, "He's an upgrade, fire, fire, fire." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But I didn't. Instead, I screenshotted the post, saved it into a new folder I created on my phone. I didn't name it anything obvious. Just a simple word. Document. Because now I understood something. I had spent years trying to fix something she'd already thrown away. And while I was busy holding it all together, she was busy preparing her next life without me. So maybe it was time I prepared something too. Not for her. For myself. The thing about being overlooked for so long is that people start making mistakes around you. They think you're too weak to notice. Too broken to act. She used to joke that I was soft, that I couldn't hold a grudge even if it came with instructions. And maybe that was true once. But now I was paying attention. Quietly. Carefully. She didn't realize that when someone has nothing left to lose, they finally stop pretending. I didn't go back home. Not even to grab the rest of my things. Instead, I checked into a crummy extended stay motel on the edge of town. It had that weird lemon-scented hallway smell and sheets that felt like paper, but it gave me distance, and distance was fuel. I kept the lights low, blinds closed. She texted 2 more times, then stopped. Probably assumed I'd come crawling back once I cooled off. Probably told her friends I was being emotional or doing a bit. I could practically hear them giggling about it. But I wasn't cooling off. I was collecting. You see, Juliet and I shared a cloud drive. Something we set up years ago when we thought meal planning and budgeting apps were the keys to adulting. She'd forgotten it even existed. But I hadn't. And her phone was still syncing everything automatically. Photos, notes, voice memos, contacts, even deleted items, if you knew where to look. And I knew exactly where to look. At 2:14 a.m., a fresh batch of uploads popped up. Dozens of photos. Some with him. Some without. Mirror selfies at what looked like a hotel. A screenshot of a ticket confirmation, Miami, next month. A calendar event labeled Breakfast with M before he leaves. And then the worst of it, a folder of videos. Clips of her in our bedroom. Alone. Talking to the camera. Journal style. The dates stretched back months. I didn't want to open them. I truly didn't. But I did. In the first one, she sat on our bed wearing my hoodie, the one she always said smelled like old books and cheap cologne. She looked tired, but smug. She leaned into the lens and whispered, "Day 4. He still hasn't noticed anything. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then he does something clueless and I remember why I can't stay." The second one was worse. Day 19. I made him his favorite pasta tonight, and he said it was the best thing he's eaten all year. It was box sauce. I just wanted to see if he'd pretend to love it anyway. He did. She laughed. Into the camera. Alone. At me. She kept saying it like it was nothing. He won't leave unless I push him. He's the kind of guy who'll wait forever if you cry hard enough. I need to figure out how to leave without being the bad guy. It wasn't just cheating. It was cruelty. Premeditated. Narrated. Documented. Like I was some character in a show she was live-streaming to her future self. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't turn off. I lay there staring at the popcorn ceiling, playing her words over and over, wondering when exactly the version of her I knew had died. Or maybe she was never real to begin with. Maybe I invented her in my head and loved the version I'd built out of scraps. But here's the thing about scraps. Eventually, you cut yourself trying to hold them together. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. Not something violent. Not something cruel. I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to watch herself lose everything without even understanding how or when it started. And I already had the one thing she'd never expect from me. Patience. For as long as I can remember, I underestimated myself. I assumed my voice would always come out too soft, my anger too thin, my presence too easy to ignore. That's what being the gentle one does to you. People carve their lives around your silence. But there's a dangerous clarity that falls over you when the person you loved most treats you like a rehearsal for someone better. It isn't dramatic. It isn't cinematic. It's just small, precise decisions, each one a quiet correction of the story that's been written about you. I didn't want to humiliate her in some loud, ugly way. I didn't want a scene in a restaurant or a viral video of us shouting in the street. I wanted her to confront the truth she'd been engineering with the same cold, methodical honesty she used on me in those private videos. I wanted her to see, in public and without my voice in the room, that she had been editing our life into something disposable. Mostly, I wanted the people she relied on for validation to witness what she'd been saying and doing when she thought no one was watching. That was the calculation. Small, surgical, measured. She had always been sloppy about backups and privacy settings, arrogant in the way people who never expect consequences are. Years of shared devices and lazy syncing meant my discovery wasn't a one-off. It was a thread I could follow. I didn't break into anything. I didn't hack. I used the breadcrumbs she left for herself, an automatic album she'd set to sync to family years ago, a forgotten shared photo folder, and a cloud where deleted items lingered long enough for someone paying attention to retrieve them. I sat in a motel room in the low light of a table lamp, and I made choices she would never make. I documented, I archived, I organized. I didn't want to be cruel. I didn't compose an email screaming accusations. I didn't leave threatening notes. I created a mirror. Over the next 48 hours, I curated what she had filmed, photographed, and scheduled. I pulled voice memos where she laughed at the idea of me caring, screenshots of messages that read like a playbook for leaving, and the calendar events that showed a future mapped without me. I didn't embellish anything. I simply gathered the truth she'd already produced and arranged it in a way that couldn't be misread. It felt sterile, almost clinical, like compiling an exhibit that made the pattern unmistakable. Then I made it visible to the people she trusted the most. Not by grand gestures, not by drama, by adding a few names to a shared album she'd set up ages ago for our family holidays. Her mother, her sister, a handful of close friends who always reacted with the same rote hearts and praise on her posts. The album was private. Invitations were ordinary, innocuous. If she'd been doing any of this in private, she had also been using that same set of people as her audience when it benefited her. When the new uploads appeared, they would see exactly what she had recorded for herself. The late-night confessionals, the clipped laughter about me, the screenshots of plans labeled without my name. There was a part of me that felt ridiculous and small while doing it. My hands trembled not with anger, but with something I hadn't yet learned how to name. Fear? Relief? A strange thrill? Maybe all of it. I imagined her face when she opened her phone and realized the photos weren't just on a device she controlled. They were popping up in a place she'd set aside for family warmth. Holiday snaps, birthday cakes, and now, suddenly, awkward hotel selfies and whispered Day 19 diary clips. I didn't write a message to accompany them. I let the content speak for itself. The first notification came at noon the next day, a little heart from her sister, then 3 question marks from a close friend, a shocked emoji from someone who'd always called her my girl. I watched the thread spin and felt a prickle in my throat like cold rain. It was not the crushing triumph I'd feared. It was a weird, sober astonishment, watching the bubble she'd been inflating deflate because the people inside were finally seeing the hole at its center. Juliet called me that night. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. Her voice was small on the recording. No bravado now. Only confusion, then a quick flurry of anger, then pleading. She sounded untethered, like someone who'd stepped off a curb into traffic and suddenly realized the cars weren't going to stop. She accused me of betrayal, of being vengeful, of ruining her life. She asked why. She said my name like an accusation. I sat there with the phone on speaker, listening to the tone she used when she wanted to make me feel small, except the roles had shifted. For the first time in a long time, there was a pause between her sentences, an unclear gap where the people on the other end of her messages were asking questions and someone else was answering. Not me, not with words, with what she had already done. The funniest and saddest thing about being underestimated is how quietly it teaches you to act. The man who once apologized for coughing too loud now sat very still and let truth do the heavy lifting. I wasn't roaring, I was arranging. I wasn't breaking anything, I was revealing it. And as the responses multiplied, concerned texts, awkward check-ins, a cousin asking, "Is everything okay?" I realized something both terrifying and liberating. The life she'd been building without me was not as secure as she thought. The walls she'd erected to protect her pride had doors she left unlocked. I still don't know if what I did was petty or necessary. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But when someone spends months rehearsing their exit and laughing at the person they're leaving behind, There comes a moment when silence stops protecting you and starts to destroy you. This was my quiet, imperfect countermeasure. Not a shout, not a spectacle, just an unexpected light pointed at corners she'd assumed were safe. When she finally showed up at the motel door 3 days later with wet eyes and a lipstick-smudged handkerchief, I opened it, and she looked at me like someone who'd been walking in a dream and suddenly found herself in daylight. She said my name like someone tasting it for the first time. She asked for explanations. I handed her an envelope with a single sheet inside, a list of dates, times, and links. No commentary, just facts. She stared at the paper until her knuckles whitened. "You could have come back," she whispered. "I did," I said. "You left me a long time ago." Her laugh then was raw, not the kind that used to make me want to stay. This one sounded thin, forced, like a person trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I watched her try to make sense of the mirror I held up, the mirror she'd polished with her own hands. And for the first time in years, I felt small and plain and oddly steady. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging for a spot in the story. I was simply telling the truth. It's a strange thing, watching someone realize they've run out of lies. Juliet stood in the doorway of the motel room, like she expected the walls to speak first. She looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, not physically, but existentially. That kind of hollow look you get when a performance ends and no one claps. Her hair was messy, her eyeliner smudged like she'd tried to clean it in the car mirror. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look curated. She looked real, but I didn't trust it. I couldn't. She sat on the edge of the bed uninvited and asked if I was going to say anything. I didn't. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been shown. The damage wasn't a secret anymore. Her voice was soft at first, trying that old gentle tone she used when she wanted to reset a fight without ever admitting fault. "You hurt me, you know," she said, of all things. "You blindsided me." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I watched her like a stranger. I was trying to find the version of her I used to love somewhere beneath the wreckage. She must have seen it in my face, the cold shift, because she got defensive fast. Said I'd violated her privacy, that I exaggerated everything, that I had manipulated people to turn against her. But she never denied anything I exposed. That silence of hers between accusations was all the confirmation I needed. She kept trying to spin it. Said we were already distant, that she was lonely, that I wasn't present enough. But that wasn't what she'd said in those private videos. She hadn't just fallen out of love. She had mocked me, ridiculed me like I was a broken toy. She'd spent months performing for a camera while I'd begged in silence for scraps of attention. This wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal with a script and costume changes. Eventually she cried. She always knew how to cry beautifully, just enough to seem fragile without becoming messy. But this time, I didn't reach for her. I didn't offer tissues. I let her sit in the silence she'd always filled with noise. I realized, in that moment, that she had never learned how to sit with stillness. It made her uncomfortable. It exposed things she couldn't control. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. It was the first honest question she'd asked me in a year. And I told her the truth. "I don't want anything from you anymore." She flinched, like the words themselves slapped her. I expected her to argue, to scream, to get up and storm out, but she didn't. She just sat there, quietly unraveling in real time. And I sat across from her, equally still, no longer begging to be understood. I wasn't there to punish her. I wasn't there to get even. I was there because she needed to look me in the eyes and realize she'd lost me for good. Not because I wanted revenge, but because she had spent too long rehearsing a life where I was disposable. And now she was living it. She asked if we could go to counseling. Said she'd delete everything. Start fresh. Said people make mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a series of decisions. Documented. Intentional. I reminded her of the words she used in those videos. I asked her if any of them were lies, or if she really meant it when she said I made her skin crawl and acted like a fanboy instead of a husband. She didn't answer. Her lip trembled. I think part of her wanted to scream. But there were no more angles left to manipulate. No more half-truths to lean on. Before she left, she turned back and asked, "Are you going to tell people everything?" "I didn't have to," I said. "You already did." She stared at me for a long time, and I could see the thought flickering behind her eyes. The regret, the fear, the slow descent into consequences she never believed would apply to her. That's the thing about people like Juliet. They think the truth is just another version of the story they can reshape if they smile right or cry on cue. But I wasn't writing her script anymore. I was just letting her read it. I didn't go back to the house. Not to pack. Not to check the mailbox. Not even to grab the hoodie she always stole from me on cold mornings. I didn't need anything from that place anymore. I'd already left long before I walked out that door. I just didn't realize it at the time. I changed my number 2 days after she left the motel. I sent a single email to our landlord, a polite notice of departure. I let her figure out the lease, the utilities, the mess of her own making. She tried to reach me a few times through mutual contacts, but I'd already let them all go too. Not out of bitterness. Out of necessity. Starting over doesn't work if you keep one foot in the ash pile. I got a new place 2 towns over. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Small balcony. Quiet neighbors. The kind of place where no one asks questions when you sit alone at the laundromat reading a paperback and sipping burnt coffee. It didn't feel like home right away. It felt temporary, like everything else. But then, slowly, I noticed things. Like how the silence didn't feel sharp anymore. Like how I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes, expecting an apology that never came. I started walking in the mornings. Something I never did before. I'd wake up early, before the sun fully committed, and just walk the trail behind the apartment complex. Sometimes with music, sometimes without. Just my feet, my breath, and the crunch of gravel. I didn't set goals. I didn't count steps. I just moved forward. And weirdly, beautifully, things began to feel still in the right way. One afternoon, I found an old notebook in a thrift store. I almost didn't buy it. It was one of those full-leather journals, the kind that looks like it belongs to someone more poetic than me. But something about it felt like permission. I took it home and wrote on the first page in shaky pen. Not everything broken stays broken. I didn't fill it with revenge fantasies or angry rants. I wrote small things. What the sky looked like that day. A dream I remembered. A list of things I wanted to do that had nothing to do with anyone else. Learn to cook 1 meal well. Fix my posture. Visit a state I'd never seen. Laugh without second-guessing. It's strange how little pieces of yourself come back when no one's trying to rewrite you. The truth is, I'm not angry at her anymore. I don't forgive her, not in the way people expect. But I don't carry her around with me either. That version of me, the man who begged quietly and apologized for his own existence, he's gone too. We both vanished in the end. And maybe that's the most honest thing that ever happened between us. Sometimes I think about what I'd say if I ran into her again. If she saw me now, not richer, not stronger, not dramatic, just better. The version of myself she never met because she never looked closely enough. I don't think I'd say anything at all. I think I'd just nod and keep walking.